She signed the divorce papers without fighting for a single dollar. No alimony, no assets, no apartment. Nothing. Her husband's lawyer stared at her like she had lost her mind. $2 million was sitting on the table, and she pushed it away like it was pocket change. They thought she was broken. They thought 7 years of being silenced, humiliated, and erased had finally crushed her spirit. They were dead wrong. Because 45 minutes later, a private jet screamed over the Manhattan skyline so low that the windows of the Waldorf Astoria shook like they were about to shatter. 500 of America's most powerful people dropped their champagne glasses and looked up in terror. And on the giant screens behind the stage, where her billionaire ex-husband was about to give the speech of his life, a single document appeared. A patent filing with her name on it. Not his. Hers. What happened next destroyed a $14 billion empire in less than 10 minutes. But here is the part nobody saw coming. She did not keep a single penny, and by the end of this story, you will understand exactly why that decision made her the most powerful woman in the room. But first, we need to go back. Back to a cold kitchen, an untouched plate of pasta, and the night Eleanor Chambers discovered that the man she loved was not just cheating on her, he was erasing her from existence. Stay with me. This one is going to hit different. Value statement. Before we begin, here is why this story matters. This is not just about revenge or billions of dollars. This is a story about what happens when someone tries to erase your name, your work, and your worth. And you decide to write yourself back into the story with your own pen. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel invisible by someone who should have been your partner, this story was written for you.
The ink was still wet on the decree when the engine of a Gulfstream jet screamed over the Manhattan skyline, shattering the polite conversation of the city's elite. Inside the penthouse ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, 500 of America's most powerful people stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses trembled in manicured hands. Crystal chandeliers swayed like nervous pendulums. The window shook so violently that a senator's wife dropped her clutch and grabbed her husband's arm. But we need to go back. Back before the jet. Back before the gala. Back to the moment Eleanor Chambers realized that the man she had loved for 7 years had never loved her at all. And that everything she had built with her own 2 hands was about to be stolen from her one final time. And here is something every woman should know. The most dangerous moment in any relationship is not the betrayal itself. It is the moment right after, when you have to decide who you are going to become. Eleanor Chambers decided to become someone terrifying. But first, she had to survive being no one at all. 6 weeks before the jet shattered the Manhattan sky, Eleanor sat at the kitchen island of a Lakeshore Drive penthouse in Chicago that most people would kill to live in. It was 9:30 at night. The pasta she had made from scratch had gone cold 2 hours ago. Marcus's plate was untouched. The candle she had lit burned down to a stub of wax. She ate alone, again standing at the counter because sitting at the long dining table by herself felt too pathetic. The penthouse was beautiful. Everyone said so. 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, Italian marble floors, a wine cellar that cost more than most people's houses. It had been featured in Architectural Digest twice. Eleanor hated every square inch of it. It was not a home, it was a display case, and she was the decorative object gathering dust on the shelf. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Board dinner running late. Don't wait up. She did not reply. She had stopped replying to those texts about 2 years ago, right around the time she noticed that board dinners always seemed to smell like Chanel No. 5 when Marcus finally stumbled home at 1 in the morning. Eleanor cleaned the kitchen. She packed Marcus's untouched pasta into a container and put it in the refrigerator, where it would sit next to 6 other containers of untouched meals from the past week, a small graveyard of effort nobody appreciated. Then she went downstairs. The basement of the penthouse had been converted into what Marcus publicly called his innovation lab. In reality, Marcus had not written a single line of code since college. The room belonged to Eleanor. 2 massive monitors, a mechanical keyboard she had owned since graduate school, a whiteboard covered in algorithmic equations, and a small framed photo of her mother. This was where Eleanor had built Aegis. Not Marcus, Eleanor. Aegis, the adaptive engine for generalized intelligence systems, was the predictive algorithm that had turned Sterling Dynamics from a struggling startup into a $14 billion empire. It could predict market fluctuations, optimize energy grids, model weather patterns, and analyze medical data with a precision that made every competitor in Silicon Valley grind their teeth. Marcus Sterling was on the cover of Forbes because of Aegis. He was invited to the White House because of AGS. He was called a visionary, a genius, the future of American technology, and he had not written a single line of it. Eleanor had. Every function, every variable, every elegant solution to every impossible problem. She had written AGS over the course of 5 years, starting in this very basement, coding through the night while Marcus slept upstairs or entertained clients, or flew to conferences where he accepted awards for her work. At first, she had not minded. They were partners, she told herself. He was the face, the salesman, the fundraiser. She was the engine. Every successful company needed both. But somewhere around year 3, Marcus stopped saying we and started saying I. He removed her name from the patent filings. He told the board she was a consultant, not a co-founder. When a journalist once asked if his wife contributed to the technology, Marcus had laughed and said, Eleanor keeps the house running, while I keep the company running. We all have our roles. She had watched that interview from this basement, her hands frozen on the keyboard, something inside her chest cracking like ice on a spring pond, but she stayed. She stayed because of love, or what she thought was love. She stayed because Marcus had a way of making her feel like she was crazy for wanting credit. Like gratitude should be enough, like the penthouse and the clothes and the lifestyle were payment for her silence. And she stayed because of her mother. Every Tuesday, Eleanor drove 40 minutes to Meadowbrook Senior Living to visit Grace Chambers. Grace was 67, sharp-tongued, wickedly funny, and slowly losing her memory to early-stage Alzheimer's. The facility was expensive, nearly $15,000 a month, and Marcus had made it very clear that the payments came from his accounts. If you ever make things difficult for me, Eleanor, he had said once casually, while adjusting his tie in the bathroom mirror, I would hate for your mother's care to become complicated. He said it with a smile. That was the thing about Marcus. He always smiled when he was being cruel. On this particular Tuesday, Eleanor walked into her mother's room at Meadowbrook to find Grace sitting by the window, knitting something that might have been a scarf or might have been a small abstract sculpture. Grace was having a good day. Her eyes were sharp, her tongue sharper. You look thin, Eleanor, Grace said without looking up. Is that man feeding you or just feeding his ego? Mom, please. I am old, not blind, Grace said, setting down her knitting. When your father looked at me, I felt taller. When Marcus looks at you, you shrink. That is not love, baby girl. That is a cage with nice curtains. Eleanor sat down on the edge of the bed. It is complicated, Mom. It is not complicated. It is simple. My mama told me something, and I am going to tell you the same thing. Grace reached over and took Eleanor's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Never let a man hold the pen when it is your story being written. Eleanor squeezed her mother's hand and said nothing. But that night, driving home along the dark highway, those words rattled around in her skull like a marble in a jar. Never let a man hold the pen. She arrived home at 7:30 to find the penthouse dark. Marcus was not there, which was not unusual, but his laptop was open on the kitchen counter, which was. Marcus never left his laptop unattended. He was paranoid about security, which Eleanor always found ironic, given that she was the one who designed all of his security protocols. She should not have looked, she knew that. But something, call it instinct, call it years of suppressed suspicion, made her glance at the screen. It was not an email from another woman. It was not a text message full of incriminating emojis. It was something far worse. It was a legal document, a filing to reclassify the Aegis patent under a new shell company called Pinnacle Intellectual Holdings. The document was dense with legal language, but Eleanor understood enough to feel her blood turn to ice. Marcus was not just taking credit for her work anymore. He was legally restructuring the ownership so that no trace of Eleanor's involvement would ever exist. He was erasing her, not from the company, but from history. She read the filing 3 times. Her hands started shaking on the second read. By the third, she was sitting on the kitchen floor, her back against the island, tears streaming down her face. She pulled out her phone and called the only person in the world she trusted completely. Helen Porter answered on the second ring. Ellie? It is almost midnight. What is wrong? He is stealing it, Helen. All of it. 7 years of my work. What do you mean, stealing it? There is a legal filing. He is moving the patent into a shell company. My name, Helen. There will be no record I ever existed. Silence on the line. Then Helen's voice, low and fierce. Then we fight. With what? Eleanor whispered. He owns the lawyers. He owns the judge. He told me last week I should be grateful he lets me keep a credit card. Ellie, listen to me. You are the most brilliant person I have ever met. You built a $14 billion algorithm in a basement. If anyone can fight this, it is you. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at the kitchen around her, the cold pasta in the refrigerator, the empty dining table, the cage with nice curtains. Okay, she said. Okay, I will fight. She did not know it yet, but that phone call was the first step on a road that would lead to a Billionaire's Gala, a jet screaming over Manhattan, and the most spectacular public downfall in American corporate history. But first, things were going to get much, much worse. Helen Porter had been Eleanor's best friend since their freshman year at Northwestern, when they had been assigned as roommates in a dorm that smelled like old carpet and ambition. Helen had become a divorce attorney, one of the best in Chicago, known for her ability to make powerful men write very large checks. 2 days after the kitchen floor phone call, they met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. Helen had brought reinforcements, a yellow legal pad, her laptop, and a bottle of wine disguised in a paper bag. First things first, Helen said, uncorking the wine under the table with practiced discretion. Tell me everything about the Aegis Code, every detail, every timestamp, every late night you spent in that basement. Eleanor told her. It took 2 hours and most of the wine. Here's the thing, Helen said, scribbling notes. Code repositories, keep commit logs. Every time you saved a version of Aegis, it created a time-stamped record with your user ID. Ghostwriter 177, right? Right. Those logs are your fingerprints. Even if Marcus moved the patent, the logs prove you wrote the code. I am going to connect you with the best intellectual property attorney in the state. His name is David Crawford. He handled the Morrison Tech case 3 years ago. He does not lose. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt something she had forgotten existed. Hope. David Crawford reviewed the evidence and called Eleanor within 24 hours. Mrs. Sterling, this is a slam dunk, he said, his voice confident and brisk. The commit logs are time-stamped and tied to your user credentials. No judge in the country would deny your authorship. We file the counterclaim next week. Eleanor hung up and exhaled. She slept peacefully that night for the first time in months, curled up on the sofa in the basement because she could not bear to share a bed with Marcus. She dreamed of her name on a patent, her name on something real. She should not have relaxed. She should have known that Marcus Sterling did not become a billionaire by being careless. 3 days later, Marcus came home early. Eleanor was in the kitchen, making dinner out of habit more than hope. He walked in, wearing his navy Tom Ford suit, poured himself a scotch, and sat down at the island. He was smiling. "Eleanor," he said pleasantly, "come sit with me." Something in his tone made her stomach tighten. She sat down across from him. "I hear you have been talking to attorneys about my company." The room tilted. Eleanor gripped the edge of the counter. "How did you—" "Vanessa is very resourceful," Marcus said, swirling his scotch. Vanessa Blake, his 29-year-old mistress turned VP of Communications. A woman who had the moral depth of a puddle and the strategic instincts of a viper. She happened to become Instagram friends with Helen's paralegal. Lovely girl, very chatty after 2 martinis. Eleanor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "It is my code, Marcus." "Was your code," Marcus corrected, taking a sip. "I had Sebastian move all the commit logs to a new server last night." "Your user ID?" "Deleted." "The timestamps?" "Overwritten. As far as the world knows, Ghostwriter 177 never existed." "You cannot do that." "I already did." Eleanor stared at him. 7 years of marriage, and she realized she was looking at a stranger. Not even a stranger, a predator. "And Eleanor?" Marcus set down his glass. "If you try to go public with this nonsense, I will have Dr. Whitmore testify that you have been experiencing paranoid delusions. Remember those therapy sessions I insisted you attend? He works for me. Always has." The walls closed in. The therapist she had trusted with her deepest fears, her insecurities, her grief about her mother's illness. He was on Marcus's payroll. Every vulnerable moment she had shared was now ammunition. "Why are you doing this?" Eleanor whispered. Marcus stood up. He straightened his tie and finished his scotch. "Because I can," he said simply. "And because you should have stayed grateful." He walked out. She heard the elevator ding. The penthouse was silent. Eleanor sat at the counter for a long time. She did not cry. She was past crying. She was in the numb, airless space beyond tears, where the brain starts calculating instead of feeling. David Crawford called the next morning. His voice was different. Embarrassed, maybe? Afraid. "Mrs. Sterling, I am sorry. I have to withdraw from your case." "What? You said it was a slam dunk." "I received a call from Marcus's legal team. They have retained every major IP firm in Chicago. Conflict of interest across the board. I literally cannot find a single attorney in the state who is not already conflicted out." Eleanor closed her eyes. Marcus had bought every lawyer in Chicago just to make sure she could not hire one. "I am sorry," David said again. I truly am. But the humiliation was not over. The worst was yet to come. 2 weeks later, the Sterling Dynamics annual charity gala was held at the Drake Hotel. Eleanor attended because Marcus insisted. Appearances mattered. The wife needed to be present, smiling, decorative, silent. She wore a dress she had bought herself from a department store because Marcus had canceled her personal stylist the week before. Among the designer gowns and borrowed diamonds, she felt like a dandelion in a rose garden. Marcus took the stage to thunderous applause. He spoke about innovation, about the future of artificial intelligence, about how Sterling Dynamics was going to change the world. He spoke about Aegis as if he had dreamed it into existence through sheer genius. Then he reached for Vanessa's hand. "And I want to introduce someone very special," Marcus said, his voice warm as honey. "My partner in every sense of the word, Vanessa Blake." Vanessa glided onto the stage in a cream-colored gown. She placed one hand on her stomach and smiled at the cameras. "We are thrilled to announce," Marcus said, "that our family is growing." The room exploded with applause. Camera fractions, standing ovation. Eleanor stood at the bar, watching her husband announce his mistress's pregnancy to 400 people who had eaten at her dinner table, who had danced at her wedding, who had told her for 7 years what a lucky woman she was. Vanessa stepped off the stage and walked directly toward Eleanor. She moved through the crowd like a shark through warm water, her smile sharp and white. "Oh, Eleanor," Vanessa said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "You are still here? I thought the help used the back entrance." Laughter. Not from everyone, but from enough people to make the blood rush to Eleanor's face. Her hands trembled around her champagne glass. She set it down carefully, because if she held it one more second, she would shatter it, and she refused to give them the satisfaction. She walked out. Her heels clicked on the marble floor, the only sound in a room that had gone uncomfortably quiet. No one followed her. Outside, the Chicago wind cut through her department store dress like a knife. She stood on Michigan Avenue, shaking, not from the cold. Here's the thing about public humiliation. It only defines you if you let it be the last chapter. For Eleanor, standing on that sidewalk with mascara running down her cheeks, it was not the end of anything. It was the first page of a very different book. She just did not know it yet. Her phone rang. "Helen?" "I saw the news alert," Helen said. "The pregnancy announcement. Ellie, I am so sorry." "Helen?" "Yes?" "I need you to stop being sorry and start being angry. Can you do that?" A pause. Then Helen's voice, cold and sharp as a blade. "I have been angry for 7 years. What do you need?" "I need a plan. A real one. One that Marcus cannot buy his way out of. Come to my apartment. Tonight. I have wine and I have an idea." Eleanor hailed a cab. As it pulled away from the Drake Hotel, she looked back at the golden light spilling from the windows, the laughter floating through the glass. "Enjoy it, Marcus," she thought. "That is the last party you will ever throw." The catastrophes came in threes, like waves in a storm, each one bigger than the last, each one designed to push Eleanor Chambers further underwater. Catastrophe number 1 arrived in a manila envelope. Marcus filed for divorce first. Of course he did. His legal team had been preparing for months, assembling a case that painted Eleanor as an unstable, ungrateful woman who contributed nothing to the marriage. The prenuptial agreement, which Eleanor had signed at 27 when she was too in love and too naive to read the fine print, capped her payout at $2 million. Arthur Graves, Marcus's personal attorney, called Eleanor to deliver the terms. $2 million, Arthur said, his voice smooth as oiled gravel. Full non-disclosure agreement. Sure. You vacate the Lakeshore Drive residence by the end of the month, and you agree never to publicly discuss Sterling Dynamics, its products, or its leadership. He wants me to disappear, Eleanor said. He wants to be generous, Arthur corrected. Most men in his position would leave you with less. Be grateful, Eleanor. There was that word again. Grateful. Catastrophe number 2 struck the next morning. Eleanor drove to Meadowbrook Senior Living for her regular Tuesday visit with Grace. She walked through the front doors with a box of her mother's favorite butter cookies and a new knitting pattern she had printed from the internet. The receptionist stopped her. Mrs. Sterling, I am sorry, but there has been a change in your mother's status. What kind of change? The funding for her room has been frozen. We received notification from the account holder that payments are suspended effective immediately. We are required to initiate a transfer to a state facility within 48 hours. Eleanor felt the ground open beneath her. Let me see her. Let me see my mother right now. She found Grace in the hallway, sitting in a wheelchair beside a cardboard box of her belongings, her knitting, her photo frames, a worn Bible with pages falling out. Grace looked confused, frightened, small in a way that Eleanor had never seen before. Eleanor? Grace said, looking up. Where am I going? I do not want to go. Please do not let them take me. Eleanor knelt on the linoleum floor and wrapped her arms around her mother. Grace was shaking. Her thin fingers gripped Eleanor's sleeve like a child holding on during a thunderstorm. Nobody is taking you anywhere, Mom, Eleanor whispered, but the words felt hollow because she had no money, no power, and no way to stop what Marcus had set in motion. She held her mother and cried. The receptionist looked away. The hallway was quiet except for the sound of a daughter breaking. This was the lowest point. This was where most people would have given up. Most people would have called Arthur Graves and signed the papers and taken the $2 million and spent the rest of their lives trying to forget. Eleanor Chambers was not most people. Catastrophe number 3 came by phone that evening. Helen called while Eleanor was still sitting in the Meadowbrook parking lot, staring at the rain hammering the windshield. Ellie, we have a problem. Helen, I cannot handle another problem right now. I know, but this is serious. Marcus is pushing for a competency hearing. A what? He is petitioning the court to have you declared mentally incompetent. If he wins, he gets conservatorship over your legal and financial decisions. He is using the therapy records from Dr. Whitmore. The therapy records. Every session where Eleanor had cried about feeling worthless. Every moment of vulnerability weaponized. He cannot do that, Eleanor said, but her voice sounded hollow even to herself. He can if the judge believes the therapist. And Ellie, Dr. Whitmore has already submitted a preliminary assessment stating that you exhibit signs of delusional thinking and paranoid ideation. Eleanor leaned her forehead against the steering wheel. She had no money, no lawyer, no evidence. The man who stole her life's work was trying to have her declared insane, and he was using her own pain to do it. She closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she heard her mother's voice. Never let a man hold the pen when it is your story being written. Eleanor opened her eyes. She opened her laptop, the old beat-up MacBook she had owned since graduate school, the one Marcus always mocked as beneath him. She connected to the Meadowbrook Wi-Fi. She still had one thing Marcus did not know about. Years ago, when she was building the network infrastructure for Sterling Dynamics, Eleanor had installed a backdoor into the building's HVAC monitoring system. It was a joke at the time, a hidden Easter egg, the kind of thing programmers do when they are bored at 3 in the morning. The HVAC system was connected to the same internal network as the servers. It was not supposed to be an access point, but Eleanor had designed it to be one. because she was Eleanor, and she always built in a back door. She stared at the login screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. If she accessed Sterling Dynamics' servers without authorization, it was technically a federal crime. Marcus would use it to bury her. But if she did not access them, she had nothing. No evidence, no leverage, no future. Her fingers typed the login credentials. She was in. The server architecture spread out before her like a map of a city she had built with her own hands. She knew every corridor, every hidden room, every trapdoor. She navigated to the backup repository where the original Aegis commit logs had been stored before Sebastian moved them. Marcus had deleted them. But Marcus did not understand how servers worked because Marcus had never bothered to learn. He had people for that. Eleanor knew that deleted files on a server are not truly gone. They are ghosts, invisible to casual users, but recoverable by anyone who knows where to look. And Eleanor knew exactly where to look. She began downloading fragments. Not the complete logs. Marcus's team had been thorough enough to corrupt most of them, but enough pieces to show patterns. Timestamps, code signatures, algorithmic fingerprints that were as unique as DNA. It was not a slam dunk. Not anymore, but it was something. She worked in that parking lot for 3 hours, rain streaming down the windows. The only light, the glow of her laptop screen. When she finally closed the computer, she had 16 gigabytes of fragmented evidence on an encrypted external drive. She picked up her phone and called Helen. "I am not giving up," Eleanor said. "Good," Helen said. "Because I found someone who wants to help." "Who?" "A journalist named Rebecca Taylor, Chicago Tribune. She has been investigating Sterling Dynamics government contracts for 3 years. She thinks Marcus is dirty, but she has never been able to prove it." "How does that help me?" "Because the enemy of your enemy is your very well-connected friend. Meet us tomorrow. I will text you the address." Eleanor started the car. She looked back at Meadowbrook, at the window of her mother's room. "I am coming back for you, Mom," she whispered. "I promise." She pulled out of the parking lot and drove into the rain. She had no home to go to, no money in her pocket, and a stolen hard drive full of fragmented evidence. But for the first time in years, she had something more valuable than all of that. She had a reason to fight. Eleanor needed Wi-Fi. She needed a place to work where Marcus could not track her, where no one would ask questions, and where she could spread out her laptop and her growing collection of evidence without looking over her shoulder. She found all of that in the last place she expected, the Millbrook Community Library on the south side of Chicago. It was the library where she had worked before Marcus. Before the penthouse, before the galas, before she became Mrs. Sterling and forgot she had ever been anyone else. She had been a reference librarian here for 4 years, the happiest 4 years of her life, helping college students with research papers and teaching senior citizens how to use the internet. Marcus had called it a waste of her talent. He said he was rescuing her from mediocrity. She had believed him. The library was being renovated. Scaffolding covered the front entrance, plastic sheeting hung from the ceiling, and the smell of sawdust and fresh paint filled the air. But the reading room was still open, a quiet island of oak tables and warm light. Eleanor sat up at a corner table with her laptop, a stack of printed server logs, and a cup of free coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the previous administration. She was deep in code analysis, cross-referencing timestamps with patent filings, when a voice interrupted her. "You look like you are either hacking the Pentagon or writing the worst Yelp review in history." Eleanor looked up. The man standing beside her table was tall, maybe 6'1", with sandy brown hair that needed a cut, and the kind of face that looked better when it was smiling, which it was. He was wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up and carrying a set of architectural blueprints under one arm. Something like that, Eleanor said, too exhausted for small talk. Well, the Wi-Fi here is terrible, but the coffee is free and nobody asks questions. He extended his hand. James Whitfield. I am the architect handling the renovation. Eleanor. She hesitated. Chambers. Not Sterling. She did not say Sterling. It was the first time she had used her maiden name in 7 years, and it felt like taking off a pair of shoes that had been too tight. James did not push. He did not ask why she looked like she had been crying, or why she was sitting in a library at 9 in the morning, surrounded by technical documents. He just nodded, said it was nice to meet her, and went back to his blueprints at the next table. He came back the next day. Same table, same terrible coffee. He did not speak to her, just worked quietly on his renovation plans while she worked on her evidence. On the third day, he brought 2 coffees instead of 1 and set the extra cup on her table, without a word. On the 4th day, she said thank you. On the 5th day, they talked. Should I be worried about what you are doing? James asked, watching her furiously type, muttering to herself about encryption protocols. Only if you are a billionaire, tech CEO, who stole his wife's intellectual property. I am an architect who cannot figure out how to update his iPhone. I think I am safe. Eleanor laughed. A real laugh, the first in weeks. It surprised her so much that she covered her mouth as if the sound was something fragile that might break if exposed to air. James smiled. It was a good smile, the kind that reached his eyes. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Coffee in the morning, quiet work, side by side, occasional conversation that started with architecture and slowly expanded to include books, music, the best pizza in Chicago, a deeply contested debate about whether deep dish was actually pizza or just a casserole. With delusions of grandeur, James told her about Claire, his wife. She had died of cancer 3 years ago, a fight that lasted 18 months and ended in a hospice room that smelled like disinfectant and lilies. She used to say my coffee could strip paint, James said, staring at his cup. She was right. I have never been able to make a decent cup. My mother says love makes you feel taller, Eleanor said. Did Claire make you feel taller? James thought about it. She made me feel like the best version of myself. Not taller exactly, more like the building I was always supposed to be, instead of just the blueprints. Eleanor looked at this man, this quiet, kind man, who built libraries and drank terrible coffee and talked about his dead wife with a tenderness that made Eleanor's chest ache, and she thought, this is what it is supposed to feel like. This is what being seen feels like. She did not fall in love with James that week. It was too soon and too complicated, and she was too broken. But she felt something shift, a door opening, just a crack, letting light into a room that had been dark for a very long time. Meanwhile, Helen was building the war machine. She arrived at the library on a Tuesday afternoon with a woman Eleanor had never met. Rebecca Taylor was in her late 40s, with sharp green eyes, a notebook that never left her hand, and the relentless energy of someone who had been chasing a story for years and could finally smell the ending. You are telling me you wrote Aegis? Rebecca asked, sitting across from Eleanor at the oak table. Every line. And you can prove it? I have fragments. Enough to show patterns, but not enough for a courtroom. Rebecca leaned forward. What if I had told you that courtrooms are not the only place where truth matters? What do you mean? I mean that I have been investigating Sterling Dynamics for 3 years. I know Marcus is dirty, not just the patent theft. He has been modifying Aegis and selling enhanced versions to private military contractors. Surveillance capabilities, predictive targeting, the kind of technology that the Geneva Convention was designed to prevent. Eleanor stared at her. That was never part of the original design. Aegis was meant to help people, predict crop failures, optimize energy grids. Well, your husband turned your baby into a weapon, and he is selling it to the highest bidder. The room was quiet. The weight of what Rebecca was saying settled over Eleanor like a heavy coat. This was not just about a stolen patent anymore. This was about national security. This was about everything Eleanor had built being twisted into something monstrous. "What do you need from me?" Eleanor asked. "Access," Rebecca said. "The fragments you have are a start, but I need internal documents, emails, contracts, anything that proves the military modifications exist." Eleanor looked at Helen. Helen nodded. "I can get you access," Eleanor said, "but if Marcus finds out, it is not just my career that is over. He will have me arrested." Rebecca smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had faced down senators, CEOs, and her own editor on a daily basis. "Honey, I have been waiting 3 years for someone like you to walk through my door. We are not going to let him find out." That night, the 3 women sat in Helen's apartment, laptops open, wine poured, evidence spread across the dining table. They called themselves nothing. They had no code name, no secret handshake. They were just 3 women who were tired of watching a powerful man break the rules and get away with it. Eleanor worked the technical side, navigating the server backdoor, downloading fragments, mapping the architecture of Marcus's fraud. Helen worked the legal side, quietly building a case file, documenting every violation, every lie, every act of intimidation. Rebecca worked the journalism side, connecting dots, verifying sources, building a story that would detonate like a bomb on the front page of every newspaper in America. And here is a piece of advice that saved Eleanor's life. Always keep your own copies, your own records, your own proof of who you are and what you built. Because the day someone tries to erase you, those receipts become your sword and shield. Eleanor had receipts, and she was sharpening them into something lethal. 3 weeks into the operation, Eleanor made a discovery that changed everything. She was navigating the backup servers through the HVAC backdoor, mapping the file structure of a partition she had never seen before, when she stumbled across a hidden directory. It was protected by a secondary password. She tried the obvious ones first: Marcus's birthday, the company founding date, his mother's maiden name. Nothing worked. Then, on a hunch that made her stomach turn, she typed Genius 2019. Access granted. She called Helen immediately. "His backup server password is Genius 2019, Eleanor said flatly. Helen was silent for a moment. Then, "Of course it is. The man names his password after himself. Shocking." "Wait, there is a secondary authentication layer. Let me guess, something equally humble." Eleanor stared at the screen. Her jaw tightened. "Eleanor, it's nothing. 777. Silence on the line. "Well," Helen said finally, "that is going on the evidence wall." Inside the hidden directory, Eleanor found what Rebecca had been looking for: contracts with private military firms. Modification logs showing how Aegis had been enhanced with surveillance and predictive targeting capabilities. Financial records showing payments routed through 3 offshore shell companies. But she also found something else, something that turned her blood cold. A folder labeled Project Cerberus. Inside were technical specifications for a weaponized version of Aegis, a system designed not to predict market trends or optimize energy grids, but to identify, track, and neutralize human targets. It was a digital assassination tool, and Marcus was selling it to the highest bidder. Eleanor closed her laptop. Her hands were shaking. She had built Aegis to save lives, to predict famines before they happened, to optimize power grids so hospitals never lost electricity. Marcus had turned it into a weapon capable of killing people. She called Rebecca. "I found it," Eleanor said. "All of it. The military contracts, the modifications, everything. But Rebecca, it is worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "He built a kill system, predictive targeting for human beings. He calls it Project Cerberus." Rebecca was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was tight with controlled fury. "How fast can you get me those files? I am downloading them now." "Good. Because we are not just taking down a cheating husband anymore, Ellie. We are stopping a man who is selling murder to the highest bidder." The plan accelerated. Rebecca worked around the clock, building the story, verifying every document, connecting every financial thread. Helen prepared a legal brief for the Department of Justice. Eleanor continued mining the servers, extracting evidence like a surgeon removing shrapnel. And through it all, James Whitfield showed up at the library every morning with terrible coffee and a quiet presence that kept Eleanor anchored to the earth when everything else was spinning out of control. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of code analysis, Eleanor sat at the library table with her head in her hands. "Bad day?" James asked. "I found out that something I built, something I am proud of, was turned into a weapon, and I do not know if I can fix it." James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was renovating a building in Oak Park last year, we found asbestos in the walls. The original architect had used it because it was cheap and effective. He did not know it would hurt people." "What did you do?" "We tore it out. Every last fiber. It was expensive, and it delayed the project by 6 months, but the building is safe now. The architect's original vision, the beautiful bones of the structure that survived, the poison did not." Eleanor looked at him. "You are comparing my algorithm to asbestos. I am comparing your algorithm to a beautiful building that someone else filled with poison. The building is not the problem, Ellie. The person who poisoned it is." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. He did not pull away. "Thank you, James." "For what?" "For not trying to fix it. For just being here. That is all I know how to do," he said. "That and make terrible coffee." The story was ready. Rebecca Taylor had spent 3 weeks turning Eleanor's evidence into a 20,000-word investigative masterpiece. It documented everything: the patent theft, the military contracts, Project Cerberus, the financial shell games. She had 3 independent sources confirming the key details and a legal review from a First Amendment specialist who said the story was bulletproof. The Chicago Tribune scheduled it for the front page of Sunday's edition. Rebecca called Eleanor at 10 on Saturday night. "It is done, Ellie. We go to print in 12 hours. By tomorrow afternoon, every major outlet in the country will be running this story. Marcus is finished." Eleanor sat in Helen's guest room, where she had been staying since Marcus changed the locks on the penthouse. She exhaled. For the first time in months, the weight on her chest lifted. "Thank you, Rebecca, for everything. Thank me tomorrow. Tonight, sleep. You have earned it." Eleanor hung up. She called James. "I think it is almost over," she told him. "You okay?" "I will be, soon." She slept deeply that night. No nightmares, no 3 a.m. panic attacks. Just the peaceful unconsciousness of a woman who believed that justice was 12 hours away. She should have known better. At 2:17 in the morning, her phone rang. Rebecca's name on the screen. Eleanor answered. Rebecca was sobbing. Ellie, the story is killed. What? My editor pulled it. He got a call from Marcus's legal team 2 hours ago. They threatened the paper with a $500 million defamation lawsuit. The publisher caved. The story is dead. Eleanor sat up in bed. The room spun. Rebecca, no. We have the evidence. It is all verified. It does not matter. The paper cannot afford a $500 million lawsuit, even if we would win. The legal costs alone would bankrupt us. Rebecca's voice cracked. And Ellie, there is something else. They know about you. Marcus's security team traced the server access. They know about the HVAC back door. The blood drained from Eleanor's face. How? I do not know, but they know. Marcus knows. Eleanor's phone buzzed. A new call. She looked at the screen. Marcus Sterling. She answered. His voice was ice. Eleanor, trespassing on a corporate server is a federal crime. My attorneys are filing charges in the morning. You will be arrested by noon. Marcus, but I am a reasonable man. Sign the divorce papers as they are. Take the $2 million. Walk away, and I will not have you prosecuted. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was soft in a way that was more terrifying than any shout. Oh, and Eleanor? I moved your mother. She is at a lovely facility in downstate Illinois. Very remote, very quiet. If you cause any more trouble, she stays there. Permanently. The line went dead. Eleanor sat in the dark. She was shaking so hard the phone fell out of her hand and clattered on the floor. He had her mother. He was using her mother as a hostage. Helen appeared in the doorway, awakened by the phone call. Ellie, what happened? He killed the story. He traced the hack. He is filing charges against me. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper, and he moved my mom. He took my mom, Helen. Helen sat on the bed and put her arms around her friend. He wins, Eleanor said. Every time. He always wins. Helen held her for a long time. Then she pulled back and looked Eleanor in the eyes. He wins because you keep playing his game, Ellie. Stop playing his game. What does that mean? It means we stop trying to beat him in courtrooms and newspapers. Those are his arenas. He owns them. Helen's eyes were fierce. We need an arena he does not own. Like what? Like the entire internet. Like every news outlet in the world, all at once, with evidence so overwhelming and so public that no amount of money can make it disappear. Eleanor stared at her friend. You are talking about the Gala. I am talking about the Gala. The Sterling Dynamics Future Gala. 5 days away. The biggest corporate event of the year. Every investor, every journalist, every power player in America would be in that room when Marcus took the stage to announce the new government contract. 500 people, live media coverage, and a narcissist who could not resist a spotlight. It is insane, Eleanor said. It is the only play we have left. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Rain tapped against the window. Somewhere in downstate Illinois, her mother was alone and confused in a facility that would not take her calls. Okay, Eleanor said. Tell me the plan. The plan had 5 parts, and every single one of them had to work perfectly or Eleanor would end up in prison. Part 1. Helen would contact the Department of Justice directly, bypassing the newspaper entirely. She would deliver the evidence of the military contract violations and Project Cerberus to a federal prosecutor she had gone to law school with. This was not about publicity. This was about getting the government's attention before Marcus could bury the evidence. Part 2. Eleanor would record a full video testimony. Her face, her voice, her code, everything. She would walk through the Aegis architecture line by line, demonstrating her authorship in a way that no deletion or overwriting could erase. A human being on camera, telling the truth, was harder to suppress than a server log. Part 3. Rebecca, even though the Tribune had killed her story, would leak the key findings to 3 competing outlets: the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and a tech journalist at Reuters who had been circling Sterling Dynamics for years. She could not publish the story herself, but she could make sure other people did. Part 4. James would help Eleanor secure a safe location outside Marcus's reach. His late wife Claire's family owned a cabin in the Green Mountains of Vermont. Remote, off the grid, surrounded by forest. It was the place where James had gone to grieve after Claire died, and now it would be the place where Eleanor launched her counterattack. Part 5. The Gala itself. This was the centerpiece. Eleanor needed to get inside the Waldorf Astoria's audio-visual system. She did not need physical access because she had designed the building's smart infrastructure 3 years ago as a favor to the event planner, one of the few people who had been genuinely kind to her during her marriage. She still had the access codes. At the right moment, Eleanor would hijack the screens. She would broadcast the patent evidence, the code commits, and her video testimony to every person in that room and every live stream watching at home. Marcus would be exposed in front of the world. And because he was a narcissist, because he could not resist the spotlight, he would react. He would deny, he would rage, he would incriminate himself further. Narcissists always did. They could not help it. "It is still insane," Eleanor said, looking at the plan laid out on Helen's dining table. "The best plans usually are," Helen replied. They spent 4 days preparing. Eleanor recorded her testimony in the Vermont cabin, sitting at a wooden table with autumn light streaming through the windows. She spoke clearly, methodically, walking through every algorithm, every function, every elegant solution she had created over 5 years in a basement while her husband took credit upstairs. It was the most important performance of her life, and she delivered it without a single tear. The tears would come later. For now, she needed to be precise. The night before the gala, Eleanor sat on the cabin porch. The Vermont mountains were black against a purple sky, and the air smelled like pine and cold earth. James brought her a blanket and sat beside her. "What if it does not work?" she asked. "Then you will still be the smartest person I have ever met, sitting on a porch in Vermont with bad coffee. Your coffee is terrible. I know. Claire used to say it could strip paint." They sat in silence. Crickets sang in the darkness. After a long time, James reached over and took her hand. She let him. "James, I need to tell you something. After tomorrow, my life is going to be very complicated. I might be broke. I might be arrested. I might be on every news channel in America." He squeezed her hand. "Good thing I do not watch the news." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He rested his chin on top of her hair. They stayed like that until the stars came out. 2 people on the edge of something terrifying, holding on to the only thing that felt real. The conference room at Graves and Associates occupied the 45th floor of a steel tower piercing the Chicago sky. It was designed to make people feel small, all mahogany and leather, and floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city below into a miniature. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the lights into streaks of gray and angry orange. Eleanor arrived alone, trench coat, scuffed boots, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked defeated. She looked like a woman who had run out of fight. This was intentional. Arthur Graves sat on the other side of the massive table, flanked by a junior associate who looked too nervous to breathe. There was an empty chair beside them, Marcus's chair. "Mr. Sterling sends his regrets," Arthur said, pushing a thick stack of documents across the table. "He is currently preparing for the Vanguard Gala. He trusts we can conclude this unpleasantness efficiently." Eleanor stared at the empty chair. 7 years of marriage, and he could not even show up to end it. "He is not here," she said softly. "Mr. Sterling prefers to look forward, Eleanor. You know that." Arthur opened the folder. "Regarding the settlement, per the prenuptial agreement, the payout is capped at $2 million. Additionally, you will sign the non-disclosure agreement and vacate the residence by midnight tonight." Arthur smiled. A predator baring teeth. "It is enough to start over, Eleanor. Somewhere quiet." They expected her to fight. Arthur had prepared for tears, for screaming demands, for threats of litigation. Marcus had briefed him thoroughly. He had a dossier on Eleanor's friends, her spending habits, her psychological profile. He was ready to destroy her character in court. Eleanor reached into her bag. Arthur tensed. She pulled out a pen, a cheap plastic blue ballpoint. "I do not want the $2 million, Eleanor said. Arthur blinked. "Excuse me? I do not want any money. I do not want the apartment. I do not want the cars. I do not want spousal support." She flipped to the back page of the divorce decree. Clause 14, Section B, she recited from memory. "Any party may waive financial restitution in exchange for an expedited dissolution of marriage, effective immediately upon signature." Arthur frowned. "Eleanor, be reasonable. You have no income, no assets. You will be destitute. I want a clean break, Arthur. No ties, no money trails." She signed her name. Eleanor Chambers. Not Sterling. Never again Sterling. She pushed the papers back across the table. "It is done." Arthur stared at the signature. It was too easy. Dominic had prepared for war, and she had surrendered without a single shot. "You are walking away with nothing," Arthur whispered, suspicion clouding his face. "Why?" Eleanor stood. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. The seal depicted a phoenix rising from flames. "Give this to Marcus," Eleanor said, placing it on the table. "Tonight, at the gala." "What is it? A love letter?" Eleanor smiled. It was a smile Arthur had never seen before. It did not reach her eyes, which were cold and hard as the glass behind her. "It is a reminder," she said. She turned and walked toward the heavy double doors. "Eleanor," Arthur called, unable to help himself. "What are you going to do now?" She paused, her hand on the brass handle. "I am going to go home." She opened the door and stepped out. As she walked through the marble lobby, she did not call a ride. A car was waiting at the curb. Inside was Helen, laptop open, headset on, monitoring 3 different communication channels. "It is done," Eleanor said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Phase 2, Helen said, pulling away from the curb. "The gala starts in 4 hours. Rebecca has confirmed that the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Reuters are all standing by. The DOJ received our package this morning. And Ellie?" "Yes?" "The audio-visual access codes still work. We are in." Eleanor nodded. She looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, the buildings she used to think were beautiful, the city that had swallowed her whole. "Take me to the airfield," Eleanor said. "The airfield?" "Harrison Blackwood offered us his jet. I want to be in the air when it happens." Helen glanced at her. "Harrison Blackwood? The investor? He shorted Sterling stock last month. He has been watching Marcus for years, waiting for someone to bring the evidence. He put $50 million into a trust to fund this operation." Eleanor paused. "He is old money, Helen. The kind of money Marcus spent his career mocking. Turns out dinosaurs have big teeth. Helen shook her head, a grin spreading across her face. You have been planning this for longer than I realized. I have been planning this, Eleanor said quietly. Since the night I found his password was Eleanor is nothing. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria had been transformed into a temple of ego. Golden light cascaded from crystal chandeliers, reflecting off the champagne flutes, held by 500 of America's most powerful people: senators, hedge fund managers, tech executives, media moguls. They were all here for the same reason: to worship at the altar of Marcus Sterling, the golden boy of Wall Street, the man who had supposedly invented the future. Marcus stood on the balcony overlooking the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. He was handsome, the kind of sharp jawline and ice blue eyes that graced the covers of Forbes and GQ. He adjusted his silk tie and checked his reflection in the glass. You look like $1 trillion, Marcus, said Sebastian Cole, his CFO, standing behind him with a phone in each hand. Only $1 trillion? Marcus laughed. Wait until the market opens tomorrow. Once we announce the government contract, we will be untouchable. Did the thing with Eleanor go okay? Marcus waved a hand dismissively. Arthur handled it. She took nothing. Zero. She is probably crying in a motel somewhere. He took a sip of scotch. It is better this way. She was dead weight, a small-town girl who could not keep up. She did not write anything, Sebastian. Marcus's voice dropped to a blade's edge. Aegis is mine. It has always been mine. Are we clear? Sebastian swallowed. Crystal. Arthur Graves arrived, looking unusually pale. He held the cream-colored envelope like it was radioactive. Clean break, Arthur said, handing the divorce decree to Marcus. She took zero, waived everything. She just wanted out. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Zero. Pathetic. She really is a fool. She left this for you. Arthur extended the envelope. She insisted you open it tonight. Marcus tore the seal. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, and a small USB drive. What is this? Marcus flipped the card over. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, was a string of numbers. Coordinates? Sebastian asked, peering over his shoulder. Marcus went still. These coordinates. They are here. The Waldorf. A low rumble began to vibrate through the floor. It started subtle, rattling the champagne glasses, but quickly grew into a roar that drowned out the string quartet. Guests stopped talking. Heads turned toward the massive windows. Out of the darkness, lights pierced the gloom. Not police lights, the steady blinding beams of a Gulfstream jet, painted matte midnight blue, banking hard over the city and coming in dangerously low. It swept past the hotel so close that the windows shook violently in their frames. Guests gasped, drinks crashed to the floor. Who the hell is that? Sebastian screamed. The massive LED screens behind the stage, screens meant to display the Sterling Dynamics logo, glitched. Static tore through the branding. A countdown appeared. 10, 9, 8. Cut the feed! Marcus barked at the tech crew. Cut it now! We are locked out, sir. Something is bypassing our system. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The screens went black. Then a document appeared. 50 feet tall, visible to every person in the room. Patent filing. Aegis Predictive Core. Inventor, Eleanor Chambers. The room went deathly silent. The document scrolled automatically, showing dates, timestamps, 8 years of code commits signed by user ID Ghostwriter 177. Every line of code, every breakthrough, every algorithm that made Marcus Sterling a billionaire. All of it authored by the woman he had just divorced for nothing. Then the screens split. On one side, the patent evidence. On the other, a live video feed from the jet circling above. Eleanor was sitting in a cream leather chair, holding a glass of red wine. She was wearing a tailored black suit that screamed power. Her hair was pulled back. She looked regal. She looked terrifying. She looked directly into the camera, and it felt like she was staring at Marcus across the ballroom floor. "Hello, Marcus." Her voice boomed through the Gala's sound system, crisp and clear. "You wanted a clean break. You wanted to keep the company and leave me with nothing. But you forgot one thing." She took a sip of wine. "You did not build Sterling Dynamics. I did. I wrote Aegis while you were networking. I patched the servers while you were sleeping. And I own the intellectual property." Marcus lunged for a microphone. "This is a lie. She is crazy. Security, cut the audio." "It is not a lie, Marcus," Eleanor continued, her voice overriding his. "And because I knew you would try to cheat me, I programmed something special." On the screen, a command line appeared. "Execute Protocol 0. "No!" Marcus screamed. Sebastian was on his phone, frantically tapping. He looked up at Marcus, his face the color of ash. "Marcus, the accounts, the Cayman holdings, the operating capital, it is all draining. Automated IAP clawback. The patent owner is reclaiming royalties for unauthorized use. How much? Billions. It is moving billions." At the same moment, Rebecca Taylor's story broke simultaneously on the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Reuters. Not just the patent theft, but the military contracts. Project Cerberus, the weaponization of Aegis. FBI agents were already en route to Sterling Dynamics headquarters. And then came the moment that nobody expected. An older woman in the crowd, a society columnist who had known Vanessa's family for decades, stood up and called out in a voice that carried across the ballroom. "I have a question for Miss Blake. When exactly are you due, dear? Because my daughter is an obstetrician at Northwestern, and she tells me you visited her office 3 weeks ago, not for prenatal care, for a routine physical, with no pregnancy on record." The room turned to Vanessa. Every eye, every camera. Vanessa's hand dropped from her belly. Her face went white. The pregnancy was fake. Marcus and Vanessa had staged it to make Eleanor look like a bitter, jealous woman abandoning a growing family. They had used it to justify the divorce. They had used a fictional baby as a weapon. The gasps were audible. The whispers became a roar. Vanessa tried to slip toward the exit, but the crowd had shifted. Women in evening gowns formed an unspoken wall. One of them, the senator's wife, who had dropped her clutch when the jet flew over, blocked Vanessa's path. "Going somewhere, sweetheart?" she said. "I think you owe about 200 people an apology, starting with Eleanor." Marcus stood alone on the stage. The patent document glowed behind him, 50 feet of undeniable proof. His phone buzzed, then Sebastian's, then Arthur's, then the phones of every investor in the room. Sterling Dynamics, trading halted. Pending SEC investigation for intellectual property theft. Marcus's phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "Check your password. Eleanor is nothing 777. Who is nothing now?" The microphone slipped from Marcus's fingers. It hit the floor with a hollow thud that echoed across the silent ballroom. For Marcus Sterling, it was the sound of an empire falling. For Eleanor Chambers, soaring at 30,000 feet, it was just the beginning. The arrest made every front page in America. Marcus Sterling was taken into federal custody 48 hours after the gala. The charges filled 11 pages: wire fraud, embezzlement, intellectual property theft, conspiracy to sell classified technology to unauthorized military contractors, and witness intimidation. Arthur Graves, seeing the writing on the wall, accepted a plea deal within a week and agreed to testify against his former client. Vanessa Blake disappeared from public life overnight. Her Instagram was deleted. Her apartment in Gold Coast was emptied. Someone spotted her boarding a flight to Lisbon, but after that, nothing. She became a ghost, which was fitting for a woman whose entire existence had been a performance. Sebastian Cole cooperated immediately, handing over financial records, server access logs, and a detailed timeline of every lie Marcus had told the board. In exchange, he received a reduced sentence and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer of any public company. And Grace Chambers was brought home. Helen Porter drove 5 hours to the remote facility in downstate Illinois where Marcus had hidden Eleanor's mother. She walked in with a court order and 2 U.S. Marshals and walked out with Grace in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket Helen had brought from her own apartment. "Where are we going?" Grace asked. Confused, but calm. "We are going to see Eleanor, Mrs. Chambers." "Is she okay? Is that man still bothering her?" "No, ma'am. That man is not going to bother anyone ever again." Grace nodded. She looked out the window at the cornfields passing by. "Good," she said. "I never liked him. He had small eyes. You cannot trust a man with small eyes." Helen laughed so hard she had to pull the car over. Eleanor was waiting at the door of the Vermont cabin when Helen's car pulled up the gravel driveway. Grace stepped out slowly, supported by Helen's arm, blinking in the autumn sunlight. Eleanor ran to her mother. She did not say anything. She just held her, right there in the driveway, leaves falling around them in shades of gold and red. Grace pulled back and looked at her daughter. She reached up and touched Eleanor's face. "You look taller, Eleanor." Eleanor cried. Not the broken, desperate tears of the Meadowbrook parking lot. These were different. These were the tears of someone who had walked through fire and come out on the other side, singed but standing. "Come inside, Mom." Helen made soup. Helen's soup is terrible. I know, but she tried. Grace was installed in the sunniest room of the cabin, with a view of the mountains and a fresh skein of yarn. Within 2 days, she had reorganized the bookshelf by color, critiqued the curtains, and taught James Whitfield's neighbor how to properly season a cast-iron skillet. "Your mother is a force of nature," James said, sitting on the porch with Eleanor one evening. "She is the reason I survived this." James nodded. "Claire used to say that the women in our lives are like the foundations of a building. You never see them, but without them, everything falls down." Eleanor looked at him. "James, thank you." "For what?" "For the terrible coffee, for the library, for not trying to save me. You did not need saving, Ellie. You needed someone to sit next to you while you saved yourself." She leaned over and kissed him, softly, briefly. A promise, not a declaration. He smiled. She smiled. Grace yelled from inside the house that the soup was burning. The moment broke, and they both laughed, and it was perfect. 2 weeks after the arrest, Eleanor Chambers sat in a conference room at a boutique law firm in Manhattan. Across the table were representatives from 3 of the largest technology companies in the world. They wanted Aegis. They wanted to buy the patent, the algorithm, the entire intellectual framework that Eleanor had created. The highest offer on the table was $12 billion from Stark Fujimoto Industries. Harrison Blackwood, the silver-haired investor who had funded Eleanor's operation, sat beside her. "Take the money, Eleanor," Harrison said quietly. "You have earned it. You could disappear. Buy an island, never work again." Eleanor looked at the stack of offers. $12 billion. It was more money than she could spend in 100 lifetimes. It was freedom, security, revenge in its most tangible form. She thought about Marcus, sitting in a federal holding cell, stripped of everything. She thought about Vanessa, running from a life built on lies. She thought about the code, her code, the beautiful, elegant architecture she had created in a basement while the world told her she was nothing. And she thought about what that code was meant to do. Not to predict stock prices, not to track human targets, not to make one man rich and powerful. It was meant to help people. I am not selling, Eleanor said. Harrison stared at her. You are joking. I am not. Then you are going to run the company? No. She turned to the representatives. Gentlemen, I appreciate your offers, but Aegis is not for sale. To anyone. Not for 12 billion. Not for any amount. The room erupted. Harrison sputtered into his brandy. The Stark Fujimoto representatives exchanged confused glances. Eleanor stood up. Aegis was designed to save lives, to predict crop failures before they happen, to optimize energy grids so hospitals never lose power, to analyze medical data so doctors can catch diseases earlier. That is what I built it for. And that is what it is going to do. She pulled out her phone and called a number. Tobias, it is Eleanor. On the other end, Tobias Mitchell, a 19-year-old digital rights activist who had helped manage the technical side of the Gala operation, answered immediately. What do you need, Ellie? I need you to access the Aegis source code repository. I have root access. Why? Open it up, Eleanor said. Make it open source. Harrison choked on his drink. Tobias was quiet for one beat. You are serious. Completely. You are giving away $12 billion. I am giving it to everyone. She could hear Tobias grinning through the phone. Give me 60 seconds. Eleanor held the phone in the silent conference room. Harrison shook his head. The corporate representatives looked at each other in disbelief. Uploading now, Tobias said. Status, public. In 60 seconds, the source code for Aegis replicated across thousands of servers worldwide, universities, research hospitals, clean energy startups, agricultural organizations, emergency response teams. Everyone now had access to the most powerful predictive algorithm ever created. Free. Here is what Eleanor Chambers understood that $12 billion could never buy. Some people spend their whole lives building walls to keep their power in. Eleanor tore hers down, and she discovered something that Marcus Sterling, for all his genius and charm and ambition, never understood. The thing that made her powerful was not the code itself. It was the fact that she had written it. And no amount of money, no legal filing, no deleted server log, no cruel password could ever take that away. Your name is not something anyone can give you, and it is not something anyone can take. Eleanor watched the upload bar hit 100%. She felt lighter than she had in 7 years. The ring was gone. The money was gone. The burden was gone. You are a dangerous woman, Eleanor Chambers, Harrison said, shaking his head with a mixture of frustration and admiration. I am just a librarian, Eleanor said. I believe in free information. 1 year later, the small village of Positano on Italy's Amalfi coast was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Lemon trees scented the air, and the sound of the Mediterranean lapping against the pebbled beach was a gentle rhythm that made the rest of the world feel very far away. In a small, sun-drenched bookstore near the piazza, a woman was stacking books. She wore a simple linen dress and sandals. Her hair was loose, streaked with sun-bleached highlights. Locals knew her as Ellie. She was quiet, kind, and helped the old owner organize his inventory. She never talked about her past. On the small television in the corner, a news program played. The anchor spoke excitedly. It has been 12 months since the collapse of Sterling Dynamics. The Chamber's algorithm, the open-source evolution of Aegis, has been credited with saving an estimated 200,000 lives worldwide through improved medical diagnosis, optimized emergency response, and early warning systems for natural disasters. Dominic, rather Marcus Sterling, remains in federal custody, awaiting trial. His attorney, Arthur Graves, has already accepted a plea deal to testify against him. Eleanor did not look up at the screen. She continued stacking copies of classic novels, her fingers tracing the spines the way she used to trace lines of code. The door chimed. James walked in, tanned and carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "Still terrible?" she asked. "Worse. I think the Italian water makes it angrier." She laughed. He kissed her forehead. He set the cups on the counter and leaned against the bookshelf, watching her work. "Helen called," he said. "She wanted me to tell you that the foundation received its 500th grant application this week. Universities on 4 continents." Eleanor nodded, smiling. The Eleanor Chambers Foundation, funded by Harrison Blackwood and a coalition of tech leaders, provided grants to researchers using the open-source Aegis code for humanitarian purposes. She did not run it. She did not want to. She just wanted to know it existed. "And your mom called," James added. "She said, and I quote, 'Young man, tell my daughter that the tomatoes at the market today are a disgrace, and she should grow her own.'" Eleanor laughed. Grace had moved to Positano 3 months ago, installed in a sunny apartment above a bakery, where she spent her days knitting on the balcony and terrorizing the local grocer with unsolicited advice about produce quality. Her memory still faded sometimes, but the good days outnumbered the bad, and on the good days, Grace Chambers was a force that not even Alzheimer's could fully contain. She also told the bookshop owner that the word is exquisite, not extra-quit, James said. He looked confused and possibly afraid. "That sounds right." The afternoon light shifted, turning the bookstore golden. Eleanor finished stacking the last shelf and wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at James, at the coffee cups, at the light falling through the window, at the small and beautiful life she had built from the ashes of the one that tried to destroy her. She thought about the penthouse in Chicago, the cold pasta, the empty dining table. She thought about the basement where she had written the code that changed the world while the man upstairs took the credit. She thought about the Gala, the jet, the 50-foot screen, the look on Marcus's face when he realized that the woman he had called nothing was everything. And she thought about her mother's words, the words that had started all of it. Never let a man hold the pen when it is your story being written. Eleanor picked up a book from the shelf. She opened it to the first page, sat down in the chair by the window, and began to read. The bell above the door chimed softly in the Mediterranean breeze. James sat across from her, with his terrible coffee and a newspaper he would not finish. Somewhere above them, Grace was arguing with a tomato vendor. Outside, the sea glittered blue and endless. And that is the story of how Eleanor Chambers brought down an empire without firing a single shot. She proved that sometimes the most powerful move is not to take the king. It is to flip the board entirely. What would you have done in Eleanor's position? Would you have kept the $12 billion, or would you have set the code free? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And here is one last thought to carry with you. Your name is not a gift someone gives you. It is not a line on a contract or a signature on a patent. Your name is the sum of everything you have built, everything you have survived, and everything you have chosen to become. And nobody, not a billionaire, not a corporation, not the most powerful man in the room, Nobody gets to erase it. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It truly helps the channel grow. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next story. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. And that is the story of Eleanor Chambers, a woman who walked away from $12 billion because she understood something most people never learn. Your worth is not measured by what you keep. It is measured by what you build, what you survive, and what you choose to set free. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, do me a small favor. Hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, but it tells the algorithm to share this story with someone else who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done with $12 billion? Would you have kept it or set it free? I genuinely want to know, and I read every single comment. And if this is your first time here, welcome. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about ordinary people who refuse to stay silent. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss the next one. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that their name matters. Sometimes one story is all it takes to change the way someone sees themselves. Thank you for staying until the end. That means more than you know. I will see you in the next story. Disclaimer: this story was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our creative team to deliver meaningful entertainment with real-life lessons. All characters and events are fictional, but the emotions are universal. We believe that every story should leave you with something more than just entertainment. It should leave you with something worth remembering.